So there's one more thing I would like to show you, which will be also beneficial for you for later debugging. Okay, what I would like to do is to show you how you can use the breakpoints and debugger. In this case, we want to see exactly there are two objects being created. Okay, so there are two ways for you to set a breakpoint. Two ways. Okay, either you can do this way. Okay, let me just first of all, let me just go to the test birthday over here. So let's say I want to really examine this particular test feature line by line. Let's say I want to this particular feature. Okay, so there are two ways. Let me show you approach 1 or 2. Okay, approach number 1, I can simply just go to, remember the different views here, I can just go to the flat view of this particular class, right? So that one there actually got accumulated all the feature, all the contracts from the ancestors. So now the one I want to test is T creates new birthday. If I hit click on that, you can see there are some empty circles around every line. So these are the so-called breakpoints, which means if I click on them and the next time I hit run, it's going to invoke the debugger, which means the execution flow is going to pause over there at every breakpoint. So now what I want to do is I want to, for example, pause over here, and then see what happened. Okay, and then I also want to pause after the second creates and see what happened. And then I also want to pause over here to see what happened, right? So these are the 3 points I would like to pause. Okay, so this is one way to do it. Okay, there's another way to do it. Let me show you a second way. You can try either way. Let me first of all go back to the basic text view. And remember when I talk about the default setup for your layouts, so there is a feature tag over here which I mentioned. It has to do with debugging. So let me now tell you what that really means. Okay, so now if I click on this feature here, in case you don't have it, please don't worry. You simply just go back to the magical sequence, view, towards layout, and then reset towards layout, and then feature will show up. Okay, so now what I should do is I should drag and drop that particular feature. Okay, let me just go to that particular feature from here. Okay, so double click to highlight the feature, right click, so you will select it, and then right click into the feature panel. Okay, if you do that, you can see that one there also shows to you the breakpoints around every line of this particular feature. But since I already set up the breakpoints from the first approach, so they are already there. Okay, you can try either the flat view or you can try the feature panel by using drag and drop. Either way is okay. Okay, so just in general, debugging is it's really a process that's really hard to explain precisely, but I can only tell you, in order to debug your code, you have to set a breakpoint. Wherever you have doubts about where maybe where it doesn't really work, so you have to set a breakpoint over there. Or you want to examine the object structure, which is the case we are dealing with now. Okay, so let's see this. Already we set 3 breakpoints, so that means the next time we execute the code, it's going to pause over there. So now, unlike in Java, in Eclipse, you would say run Java. You want to say debug is Java application, right? That's what you would say in Java case. But for now, we just say run. Okay. And also remember, I said before, for unit testing, root class, if the current class is for unit testing, so you run the workbench system to see the report, and you say run. Sometimes when you want to debug, that's exactly the point here. Okay, so now you don't want to say run workbench system anymore, which is not going to pause at the breakpoint. What you want to say instead is to say run. If you say run over here, it's going to pause. Okay, so now in our case, it's pretty simple. There's no previous breakpoint set up, or there's no previous violation or exception happening. So I would say in the general case, you gotta watch out, because sometimes it might be right before, maybe right before we hit the breakpoints, there might be some previous breakpoints, or there might be some previous occurrence of some violation or exceptions. So you may have to, so whenever you want to skip the current one, you can always hit run. So you're gonna go to the next one. Okay, so now we are here. It's right before we try to call this particular create over here. Let me just show you a little bit outline over here that you want to pay attention to. We know the stack trace already over here. That tells you how the execution flow leads to the current point of execution. And then there is this particular objects panel. You can see objects over here. It shows you all the variable that makes sense at currently. And let me just show you one thing here. What about BD? BD, it says currently it is void. Void is equivalent to null, like no address at the moment, right? So now, because BD, we declare that we haven't created just yet. So the breakpoint of the fact that we pause at this breakpoint simply means it's right before we try to execute this particular line, right? If you learn about debugger from me in 2030, so this is conceptually the same as how you would do debugger and breakpoints in Java, right? Just the same. We're just reviewing that quickly. And whenever you want to debug, printing out messages to console is not a way to go. You want to use debugger and breakpoints. Okay. So now at the moment, BD is simply storing void. Okay. However, let me say I want to execute one line at a time. So around over here, you can see the different kind of arrows over here. So now let's see this. One is called execute one step at a time. That's exactly what you want to do. Okay. It's like a yeah. And then there's another one like a step into. Step into is if you are currently pausing at a function call or feature call or routine call, basically. You want to walk into that particular routine. Hopefully I can show you that in some later video if we get a chance. Okay. So let me click on one step at a time. If I click on that, it has already executed this particular creation procedure. Specifically, I want you to look at BD now. You can see rather than storing void, it's now storing some address. So you want to pay attention to the address colon over here, right? But now, there's another cool feature I want to show you. Two things over here. You can see along this side over here, this a panel called watch. Okay, it's very similar to the expression watch view in the Eclipse. Very similar. If you don't see it, again, you can say views reset towards layout to reset it, and then you will see it. Okay. So now you can press, you can type any expression that makes sense in the current class. So the current class is test, is this particular class called test birthday, and now we want to refer to this particular BD local variable. So we can say, if I type BD over here, it's going to show me this object here. You can also explore it over here. So I want to show you another thing here. So now, if I want to see the expanded view of the objects, you can see around here, there's a yellow rectangle box over there, display an expanded view. If I click on that, so it says I want to drag and drop some object over here. Okay, let me move this a little bit up. Okay, what you want to do is, okay, first of all, click to highlight, right click, okay, and then you can, and then right click to drop, and then this is the view. Okay, so now that means currently this is the address of that particular object. Okay, so really for completeness and preciseness, let me copy this particular address over here and let me paste it here. Okay, so this is the address that I want to show you in just a moment. Okay, so this is the one for the blue objects here. Okay, let me just put it here. Okay, so that's my address over here, and then let's go back here. Let me just close it. Okay, so that's an object view for BD. So now, if I want to go to the next breakpoint, I can either step at a time for another 2 points, or I can jump directly to the next breakpoint. It's completely up to you. Okay, so you can either say one step at a time, or I can simply say run. So run is going to skip over all the intermediate lines and go to the next breakpoint. If I say run, so now that means I'm right before I try to execute this particular second create procedure, right? So now if I say one step at a time, so now BD has changed its address to something else. Okay, again you can see BD over here also reflected, right? It's the same, just the same expression. Okay, just by the way, what expression can you type? For example, BD makes sense. What about BD dot? It also show you, for example, BD.day. So it's gonna show you the value over here. So it's very valuable when you examine the object states of your runtime. So it's very nice for debugging purpose. Okay. So now it's BD over here, and then there's another. Let's just show it again. So let me say expanded object view, and then the same process. I'm just going to highlight first of all. Okay, just highlight the row, and then right click to drag, and right click to drop. So that's the second objects over here, second BD objects. Let me copy this address over here so I can compare that. So let me come back to iPad, and then let me paste it. Okay, let me make it a little bit smaller. Oops. Okay, so that's the second address. So let's now convince ourselves these are different addresses. Hopefully we can agree. So for example, C668, C670. So they are definitely different address. So that means we are talking about two different objects. So it's completely compatible with how we have visualized the concept. Let's come back here and then close it. The one final line to actually look at is the third line. What about the third line? So let me say run again to go all the way to the next breakpoint. Okay, so now I have bd.make over here. I want to show you the second button here to introduce to you. So far we have seen how to do one step at a time. We can also do run. There's another thing called step into over here. Okay, step into simply means if currently right before, if the breakpoint is right before some routine call, in this case it's a command call, the make. In that case, I can say I want to step into the execution of that make command line by line. That's what I can do. Before I do that, let's predict what's going to happen. You can see BD over here is the context objects. So as soon as I say step into, the current context will switch from test birthday over here into birthday because BD is of type birthday. That's exactly what's going to happen. And then once we switch the context to birthday class, what's going to be the address of the context object, the current objects, like this? That should be whatever BD's address is, right? And we think it should be this particular address, but let's verify that to make sure everything actually works. So I'm gonna basically step into over here, and then once I said step into, so now the reason that we're getting this particular call here is because you can see in the stack trace, when we try to call the make implementation, that's what we intend to do. That's why we step into. However, you will always first check to see if the invariance of the class, the birthday class, will be satisfied. So now that's why it's the underscore invariant in the stack trace simply means IFO runtime is performing some invariant check. If you want to see it, you can definitely take a look. If you don't want to see it, let's go to the top of the stack. So we are looking at this this particular helper query that we defined previously. Okay, so now if you don't want to see this process here, there's another third button you can use. It's something called step out. Okay, if you click on that, so now we step out of the process for invariant checking. So now we are right in the beginning of the implementation for make. Okay, so now just verify that. Remember the green object over here, so it used to be 9 and 14, and we want to change it to 7 and 15. Right, so if you go back here, so now you can see 9 and 14 currently, we want to change that is the parameters 7 and 15, the arguments. Okay, good. So now what we want to do is compare this particular address. Okay, but now you can see BD doesn't make sense anymore. That's why it's grayed out, because the current class has been switched to birthday. There is no BD in birthday, right? So now because the current class is birthday, in the Java sense, what's this? In the IFO sense, what's current? Okay, current is the equivalent of this. So now what I will do is I will simply type current over here. Okay, it's some address over here, but to make it clear, why don't I show the expanded object view again? Okay, let me drag and drop the objects again. So highlights over here. Okay, sorry, highlight the road, and then you will right click to drag and right click to drop. Okay, so this is the address over here. And then let me just copy that address over here, and then I will switch to iPad. So now is just to make it small enough for you to see. Our hypothesis is this particular current object over here should be the same as the second object that has been created. But is it the case? Okay, let's compare them side by side. C670, yes, they are the same. So that means we have only created two objects, object number 1 and also object number 2. And the third line over here is really manipulating the same objects as the second one that we have just created. Okay. The reason that I really want to show you thoroughly is because number 1, you can use, conceptually you should know how to draw object diagrams. And number 2, you should also use the debugger to read experiments to really know exactly how things work. That'll be a very important training for you as a software engineer. Okay, let me go back here. And then, so that'll be it. So if you want to terminate the process over here, we can simply click on the stop button here and say stop. Make sure you always stop the debugging process before you try to further edit your code. It's really important.